Liborio Bellomo walks into FBI surveillance in 2001. Handcuffs click shut. But unlike every other mob boss caught on camera, he's been running the most powerful crime family in America for nearly a decade. And the FBI had no idea. The year is 1990. Manhattan's concrete canyons hide a billion-dollar empire built on construction unions, gambling rackets, and labor extortion. At the top of this pyramid sits the Genovese crime family, the most sophisticated criminal organization America has ever seen. And at age 33, a man named Liborio Salvatore Bellomo, known on the streets as Barney, is about to become its invisible hand. This is the story of how one mobster perfected the art of silence in a world where talking too much gets you killed. This is the story of the ghost boss. Bellomo's ascent didn't follow the typical mob trajectory. Born January 8, 1957 in the Bronx, he grew up in a world where omerta wasn't just a code, it was survival. His father, Salvatore Bellomo, was a soldier in the Genovese family, close to Anthony Fat Tony Salerno, one of the most feared men in organized crime. Young Barney learned early that power whispers while weakness shouts. At age 20, in 1977, he was officially initiated into the Genovese family. No ceremony photos, no celebration, just a blood oath in a dimly lit room somewhere in Little Italy. From that moment, Liborio Bellomo ceased to exist on paper and became a shadow in America's largest criminal enterprise. The Genovese family wasn't like the Goddess or the flashy mobsters Hollywood loves. They operated differently. In the 1980s, while John Gotti was making headlines and wearing $1,000 suits to court, the Genovese family was pioneering something far more dangerous: the concept of the front boss. Vincent the Chin Gigani, the family's actual leader, would wander Greenwich Village in a bathrobe, mumbling to parking meters, convincing the world he was insane. Meanwhile, Fat Tony Salerno sat in social clubs, playing the role of boss for FBI cameras. The real power structure remained hidden, and Bellomo was watching, learning, evolving. In 1986, the commission case shattered the New York mob landscape. Federal prosecutors, armed with RICO statutes and years of wiretaps, indicted the heads of all 5 families. Salerno was convicted and sentenced to 75 years. He would die in prison. Gigani officially took control, but his crazy act was already in full swing. The family needed someone sharp, someone young, someone who could actually run operations while Gigani wandered the streets in his pajamas. They chose Bellomo. At just 33 years old, he became a capo, controlling a powerful crew based in the Bronx and Manhattan. His territory included something more valuable than drugs or gambling: the labor unions at the Jacob Javits Convention Center. The Javits Center was a fortress of corruption. Every truck that entered, every convention staged, every trade show hosted required union labor. And Bellomo controlled those unions through intimidation, violence, and a network of corrupt officials who understood the price of defiance. He didn't need to be physically present. He didn't need to make threats himself. The system ran itself because everyone knew who held the real power. Federal prosecutors would later estimate that the Genovese family extracted millions annually from the Javits Center alone, and Bellomo's fingerprints were nowhere to be found. By 1990, the FBI was certain they had the Genovese family figured out. Gigani was the boss, albeit a mentally unstable one. Various captains ran day-to-day operations. The family was weakened, vulnerable, ripe for prosecution. Then Kenneth McCabe, an organized crime investigator for the U.S. Attorney's Office, reviewed hundreds of hours of surveillance tapes and wiretaps. What he found changed everything. Bellomo wasn't just a captain anymore. According to McCabe's analysis, presented in court documents, Bellomo had become the acting boss following Gigani's indictment in the Windows case. The FBI had been watching the wrong man. While they focused on Gigani's theatrics and other high-profile figures, Bellomo had quietly assumed command of the family's most lucrative rackets. He was 33 years old and running a criminal empire worth hundreds of millions. And he did it without a single photograph, without a single recorded conversation, without leaving a trace. If this story already sounds insane, understand this. It gets darker, because while Bellomo was cementing his power, he was also eliminating threats with surgical precision. In the early 1990s, paranoia consumed the Genovese family. Prosecutors were flipping mobsters at record rates. The RICO Act, once a theoretical legal weapon, was now dismantling families that had existed for generations. Trust evaporated. Suspicion became currency. And Bellomo, now the family's acting boss, made decisions that would later haunt him. Ralph DeSimone was a mobster with connections throughout the family. Antonio DiLorenzo was another soldier, well-regarded, seemingly loyal. But rumors circulated that both men were cooperating with federal authorities. In the mob, rumors don't require evidence to become death sentences. DeSimone disappeared first. His body was found stuffed in the trunk of his car at LaGuardia Airport, shot 5 times. Execution style. No witnesses. No suspects. DiLorenzo met a similar fate shortly after, discovered in the backyard of his West New York, New Jersey home, a single bullet in his head. Federal investigators suspected Bellomo had ordered both hits, but suspicion isn't evidence. The bodies were messages written in blood. Talk to the FBI and this is your future. The murders terrified potential informants and solidified Bellomo's reputation as a boss willing to do what was necessary. But they also put him on the FBI's target list. In 1992, as Giuliani's legal troubles intensified and his mental competency became a courtroom circus, Bellomo officially took the reins as acting boss of the Genovese crime family. He was 35 years old. He controlled an organization with over 250 made members and thousands of associates. His empire stretched from New York to New Jersey to Florida, with operations in construction, sanitation, gambling, loan sharking, and labor racketeering. Annual revenues were estimated at over $500 million. And Bellomo ran it all with a communication system so sophisticated that the FBI, with their billion-dollar surveillance technology, couldn't crack it. He used walking meetings in public parks where wiretaps were useless. He employed coded language that sounded like mundane conversation. He never used phones. He never wrote anything down. And most brilliantly, he used non-Italian associates to handle the most sensitive operations, exploiting the FBI's focus on traditional Italian-American mobsters. For 4 years, from 1992 to 1996, Liborio Bellomo was the most powerful criminal in America, and the FBI barely knew his name. But in 1996, his invisibility cloak finally slipped. On June 11th, federal prosecutors indicted Bellomo on RICO charges. The indictment was devastating. Extortion, labor racketeering, and the murders of DeSimone and DiLorenzo. The FBI had finally built a case. Bellomo's lawyers moved quickly. They claimed their client had passed 2 polygraph tests denying any involvement in murder. Prosecutors weren't convinced. FBI agents literally shaved Bellomo's head, searching for evidence that he'd used lithium, a chemical some believe can help beat polygraph machines. They found nothing. The case stalled. Witnesses disappeared. Memories became conveniently foggy. By February 1997, prosecutors realized they didn't have enough for murder convictions. They offered Bellomo a deal, plead guilty to extorting a construction union and a garbage hauling company, drop the murder charges. Bellomo accepted. He was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. Most mob bosses lose power the moment they're incarcerated. The family moves on, a new boss emerges, and the old regime is forgotten. Bellomo didn't let that happen. On July 13, 2001, while serving a sentence at Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, Bellomo was indicted again, this time for money laundering related to the Genovese family's control of waterfront rackets and the International Longshoremen's Association. Federal prosecutors alleged that between 1996 and 1997, Bellomo had hidden money stolen from the ILA's pension fund. But here's the shocking part. Those years were after his arrest. The indictment made clear that Bellomo, from inside a maximum security federal prison, was still running family operations. He used lawyers as messengers. He communicated through coded letters. He made decisions about rackets, about territories, about violence. And the FBI only discovered this years later, when they finally penetrated the family's communication network. Before I reveal what happened next, drop a comment. Could you run a billion-dollar criminal empire from inside a federal prison without anyone knowing? Because that's exactly what Bellomo did for 5 years. Bellomo pleaded guilty to the money laundering charges. His release date, originally set for 2004, was pushed back. He remained in federal custody, and the FBI assumed his influence was finally fading. They were wrong. In 2006, federal prosecutors unveiled their most ambitious case yet against the Genovese family. Over 30 members were indicted on racketeering charges spanning decades. At the center of the indictment was Bellomo, still in prison, still allegedly running the family. But this time, prosecutors had something they'd never had before, a cooperating witness who claimed direct knowledge of Bellomo's orders. Peter Paluzzo was a lawyer who had worked with the Genovese family, facilitating communications between imprisoned members and the outside world. In 2005, facing his own legal troubles, Paluzzo agreed to cooperate with federal authorities. His testimony was explosive. According to Paluzzo, in 1998, while Bellomo was serving his 10-year sentence, he had ordered the murder of Ralph Coppola, a captain in Bellomo's own crew and allegedly a good friend. Coppola had been convicted on fraud charges and was scheduled for sentencing. On September 16, 1998, 2 weeks before that sentencing, Coppola vanished. His body was never found. Paluzzo testified that he had personally transported a message from Bellomo to hitmen outside the prison, authorizing Coppola's execution. The motive remained murky. Some claimed Coppola had been disrespectful. Others said he was stealing family profits. But the message was clear. Even friendship didn't protect you from Bellomo's wrath. The 2006 indictment painted Bellomo as something unprecedented in modern organized crime. A boss who had maintained control through 2 decades of federal prosecution, imprisonment, and constant FBI surveillance. The indictment stated explicitly, following his incarceration, and even after being replaced as acting boss, Bellomo retained significant power and authority within the Genovese organized crime family, and he continued to be consulted on and make decisions with respect to the Genovese family's criminal activities. In mob terms, he was the ultimate ghost boss. But prosecutors had a problem. Paluzzo's testimony was uncorroborated. There was no physical evidence that he had actually met with Bellomo to receive the murder order. Defense attorneys tore into Paluzzo's credibility, pointing out his own criminal history and his incentive to cooperate. The murder charge, once again, was too weak to guarantee conviction. In 2007, federal prosecutors offered Bellomo yet another deal: plead guilty to mail fraud, a significantly lesser charge, and receive 1 additional year instead of potential 4 years if convicted on the murder charge. This time, something unusual happened in court. Bellomo's daughter, Sabrina, stood before Judge Louis A. Kaplan alongside her 3 brothers. Through tears, she pleaded for leniency. She described her father not as a mob boss, but as a family man, someone who had missed countless birthdays, graduations, and milestones while locked away. The scene was surreal. The alleged head of America's most powerful crime family, reduced to a father watching his children beg for mercy. Judge Kaplan accepted the plea deal. Bellomo received 1 additional year. On December 1st, 2008, after 18 years of intermittent imprisonment and legal battles, Bellomo walked out of federal prison a free man. He was 51 years old. Officially, he was retired from organized crime. Legally, he was required to sever all ties with the Genovese family. In reality, nothing changed. Since 2008, Bellomo has maintained the lowest of low profiles. No social media presence. No public appearances. No interviews. No photographs. He lives somewhere in the New York area, presumably under constant FBI surveillance, yet there have been no significant arrests or indictments connected to him in over 15 years. Law enforcement officials, speaking to reporters on condition of anonymity, have consistently identified Bellomo as the boss of the Genovese crime family. Some go further, calling him the modern-day boss of bosses, a title not used since Paul Castellano's assassination in 1985. But if Bellomo still runs a family, he's done so with a level of operational security that makes his earlier invisibility look amateurish. In 2023, declassified FBI documents revealed something that stunned even veteran organized crime investigators. Bellomo hadn't just survived the federal government's decades-long assault on the mob. He had created a blueprint that other families were now copying, the concept of the invisible boss. According to the FBI analysis, multiple crime families had restructured their leadership hierarchies based on Bellomo's model. They now employed front bosses, sacrificial figures who took the heat while the real power operated in complete darkness. They used walking meetings, avoided all electronic communication, and compartmentalized operations so thoroughly that even family members didn't know the full scope of activities. Bellomo had fundamentally changed how organized crime operates in America. The Genovese family, despite decades of prosecutions, remains the most powerful and lucrative of New York's 5 families. Federal law enforcement estimates its annual revenues in the hundreds of millions generated through construction rackets, gambling, loan sharking, and sophisticated white-collar crimes. And at the top of this empire, invisible yet omnipresent, is a 78-year-old man who has spent 50 years perfecting the art of silence. So what do you think? Is Liborio Bellomo a criminal genius who outsmarted the entire American justice system, or just a lucky survivor in a world where most of his peers died or rotted in prison? Is he still pulling strings from the shadows, making decisions that affect billions of dollars in criminal enterprise? Or has he truly retired, fading into obscurity while younger mobsters fight over his former empire? Drop your theory below. And if you want to dive deeper into the world of organized crime that most people never see, subscribe for next week's shocking case. The Chicago outfit boss who became an FBI informant while still running the family. The betrayal that changed organized crime forever. Vincent the Chin Gigani wandered the streets in a bathrobe, and history remembers him as a mob icon. John Gotti wore expensive suits and craved media attention, dying in prison, his family destroyed. Liborio Barney Bellomo did neither. He stayed quiet. He stayed invisible. And he stayed in power longer than any of them. In the end, that silence was the most powerful weapon of all. True power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It simply exists, patient and unbreakable, waiting in the dark for those foolish enough to speak its name.